Every December, something unusual happens. The world slows down and then quietly resets itself. Lights appear where darkness usually wins. Old psalms return as if rehearsed by memory. People repeat rituals they never questioned, scripts they were never taught, traditions they didn't invent. And for a brief moment, the coldest month of the year feels warm. Not because the season changed, but because someone changed the season for us. December doesn't just happen. It is designed. A carefully constructed atmosphere built by illustrators, advertisers, corporations, storytellers, and the families who learned that nothing shapes a population more effectively than a shared emotion. This isn't a story about Christmas. It's a story about who built the version you celebrate. Before we begin, a disclaimer. Before we continue, a brief disclaimer. This documentary is based entirely on public sources, archival records, historical publications, cultural studies, and the documented origins of modern holiday traditions. Some elements mentioned in this investigation belong to verified history. Others belong to cultural myth, patterns, stories, and interpretations that shaped the winter holiday we recognize today. These references to myth or rumor are included not as fact, but as reflections of how perception evolves when traditions pass through generations and become systems. This episode does not promote, condemn, or reinterpret any religious, cultural, or commercial practice. Its purpose is strictly analytical, to explore how a global ritual was constructed, amplified, and inherited. You are encouraged to question everything, verify independently, and verify twice. Interpretation remains yours. Long before December became a season of lights, it was a season of fear. For most of European history, winter meant scarcity, uncertainty, and silence. Nights were longer than reason, and the cold could erase entire families with no warning and no mercy. The rituals that existed then looked nothing like the holiday you recognize today. They were darker, rougher, built for survival, not celebration. Communities lit fires not for beauty, but to keep away what they believed lived in the dark. Food was shared not out of generosity, but because hunger isolated people faster than snow. Songs were sung not for joy, but to keep spirits, both human and imagined, from collapsing under the weight of the season. There was no Santa, no red, no evergreen aesthetic, no sentimental warmth. Winter festivals were fragmented, tribal, improvised, scattered rituals across villages and regions, each one claiming its own meaning. Nothing was unified. Nothing was global. Nothing resembled the Christmas sold to the world today. The holiday you know was not inherited. It was constructed piece by piece, image by image, decision by decision. And the first step to understanding that construction is to admit a simple truth. December was not always magical. It was made magical by people, by families, and by interests that understood the power of emotion long before emotion became an industry. The Christmas you recognize, the red suit, the glowing lights, the cheerful warmth, did not emerge from ancient tradition. It was illustrated. In the 19th century, winter holidays had no universal image. In one region, the season was somber. In another, chaotic. In others, entirely absent. Then came the illustrators. Thomas Nast, a German-American political cartoonist, drew the first widely distributed version of what would eventually become Santa. Not the gentle figure you know, but a darker, heavier, almost folkloric character mapped onto American imagination. His sketches circulated through magazines long before global corporations existed, and with each drawing, an idea began to settle. What if December had a face? Decades later, another illustrator refined that face into permanence. Haddon Sundblom, working for Coca-Cola in the 1930s, painted a version of Santa that replaced winter's unease with warmth. Generosity and emotional safety, a red suit, a human smile, a glow where darkness used to be. The design worked, not because it was traditional, but because it was comforting, and comfort sells. Before Sundblom, Christmas was fragmented. After Sundblom, it had a global identity, a visual script the world would follow for nearly a century. This wasn't myth. This was branding, a calculated aesthetic that transformed December from a season into an industry. Once the image of Christmas existed, it needed someone to distribute it, to amplify it, to make it unavoidable. That work fell not to governments or religious institutions, but to families and companies that understood what December could become. The Macy family, owners of Macy's department stores, turned the holiday into a public spectacle. Their annual parade, their window displays, their in-store theatrics, all crafted a shared fantasy where shopping and celebration became the same experience. The Hall brothers, creators of Hallmark, built an emotional pipeline into December. Cards, icons, stories, every image calibrated to reinforce the idea that Christmas was a season of warmth, obligation, and carefully packaged sentiment. Montgomery Ward, a family-run retail chain, introduced a children's book that spread a new holiday mascot to millions of homes, a reminder that Christmas characters weren't inherited, they were commissioned. Sears, one of the most influential catalog companies ever created, established the logic of holiday gifting long before modern e-commerce existed. Their catalogs weren't lists of products, they were scripts for how December should feel. And above them all, the advertising dynasties that controlled the emotional direction of the season, families whose names most people never learned, but whose campaigns defined what joy looks like on a global scale. Christmas didn't spread because of religion or tradition or nostalgia. It spread because influential families and corporations found a way to turn a fragmented winter ritual into a unified emotional brand. A brand powerful enough to shape the world's mood every single year. Joy feels natural, spontaneous, human, but the version of joy we experience every December didn't appear on its own. It was shaped, refined, and eventually standardized by companies who understood that emotion can be engineered just as precisely as any product. Once the imagery of Christmas became recognizable, the next step was to create an emotional palette that people would expect and eventually crave. Red became the color of warmth, green the color of safety, gold the color of hope. Strings of lights softened the sharp edges of winter. Music created a predictable mood cycle, nostalgia, comfort, generosity. Every element had a purpose. A warm glow makes the cold feel less threatening. A simple melody feels like memory, even if you've never heard it before. A gift promises affection, whether it's earned or not. None of this was accidental. Advertising houses, family-owned companies, and early brand strategists discovered that December was the easiest month of the year to attach emotion to objects, sell the feeling, and the object sells itself. And over time, joy became something more than sentiment. It became an industry, an exportable, repeatable emotional script that could be packaged, promoted, and delivered to millions with pinpoint reliability. The most profitable product of December wasn't merchandise. It was meaning, wrapped in color and melody and sold back to a world that forgot who wrote the script. Rituals feel ancient, meaningful, sacred, but most rituals survive not because they are old, but because they are useful. A ritual is a system, a loop, a repeated action designed to create predictability in an unpredictable world. And December, more than any other month, is built entirely on repetition. The tree, the lights, the gifts, the same songs, the same colors, the same motions, year after year after year. Repetition creates memory. Memory creates comfort. Comfort creates obedience. A ritual doesn't need to be explained to continue. It only needs to be felt. That is the brilliance and the subtle power of the modern holiday season. People follow the script without knowing who wrote it. They repeat the gestures without remembering their origins. And they experience emotions that were shaped long before they were born. This is the ritual engine of December, a psychological mechanism that stabilizes society by giving millions of people the illusion of control. Through familiar actions. Stand here, light this, give that, smile now. A month built from instructions in plain sight. The perfect system is the one you participate in without realizing you've entered it. If this investigation is reshaping how you see December, stay with it. There's another layer beneath the lights. Subscribe to Dark Side Protocol to follow the next chapter of this archive. And if you ever want to see how myths laugh at themselves, you'll find a link to Punchline Protocol in the description. Mid-rolls are supposed to interrupt the story. Ours don't. If you've made it this far, you already know December works like any other system. It rewards participation and punishes distance. Patreon holds the parts of this investigation that don't fit into the public version. The fragments, the whispers, the uncomfortable parallels between ritual and control. Not required, just available to those who notice. Now, let's continue. Every emotion has a market, but no emotion is more profitable than hope. By the early 20th century, companies realized something powerful. If you can connect a product to the feeling people want to have in December, you don't need to sell the product. You only need to sell the feeling. And hope, the belief that tomorrow can be brighter, became December's unofficial currency. Retailers built their entire calendars around a single month. Advertising agencies save their strongest campaigns for it. Financial institutions loaned that people take bigger risks in December because they want the year to end with meaning. And year after year, the same cycle repeats. People spend more because they expect to feel more. Companies earn more because people expect to spend more. And governments quietly accept that holiday consumption functions like a temporary economic stabilizer. December, once a season of survival, became a season of economic recovery, a ritual wrapped in sentiment, and powered by credit cards. The modern holiday isn't just about joy, it's about momentum, a coordinated push that moves societies from one year into the next. The lights are emotional, the logic is financial, and the most profitable product of the season isn't gifts or decorations. It's the promise that hope can be purchased. Rituals guide behavior, but emotions guide memory. And December has a very specific kind of memory, one not created by families or traditions, but by the machinery of media. The modern holiday season didn't just spread through decorations and advertising. It spread through stories, films, songs, books, postcards. Thousands of small emotional signals that collectively shaped what December is supposed to feel like. Music created nostalgia for moments that never happened. Cinema built narratives that taught entire generations what holiday joy should look like. Television specials turned sentiment into a seasonal expectation. None of this was accidental. Emotional infrastructure is the most powerful architecture of all. Because once it settles into culture, it becomes self-sustaining. People seek the movies that remind them of how they're supposed to feel. They seek the songs that signal the arrival of holiday time. They measure their own joy against stories written by someone else. December became a recurring script performed not by individuals, but by society itself. This is how media turned a winter month into a global emotional climate. Familiarity creates safety. Safety creates trust. Trust creates tradition. And tradition, once amplified by media, becomes a system strong enough to shape the mood of billions. The holiday doesn't just happen, it's broadcast. For a season built on joy, December leaves a long shadow. Behind the lights and the music, there is a weight people rarely talk about, the pressure to feel a very specific kind of happiness. The holiday demands warmth, even when life is cold. It demands connection, even when people feel alone. It demands celebration, even when the year has given them very little to celebrate. This pressure doesn't come from tradition. It comes from expectation, a cultural script that tells people what they should feel instead of letting them feel what they actually do. For many, the season becomes a test. Are you joyful enough? Grateful enough? Generous enough? And when their real emotions do not match the script, they blame themselves, not the system that wrote it. The hidden cost of cheer is the quiet exhaustion of trying to maintain a feeling that was never entirely your own. December asks for more energy, more money, more emotional labor. And yet, people keep participating year after year because stepping outside the celebration feels like breaking an unwritten rule. The paradox of the holiday season is simple. The brighter the lights, the harder it becomes to admit how dark the year felt. And the more we celebrate, the less space we allow for the parts of ourselves that did not feel festive at all. When people speak about Christmas, they talk about tradition. But when historians look at Christmas, they see inheritance. Not the inheritance of families passing rituals to their children, but the inheritance of ideas crafted by the people who understood how powerful a holiday could become when emotion, story, and commerce move in the same direction. The holiday survived not because it was ancient, but because someone invested enough to give it structure. The Macy family turned December into a public spectacle, a ritual of crowds, display windows, and shared anticipation. The Hall brothers turned sentiment into an industry, owning the emotional vocabulary millions now use to express affection and memory. Advertising dynasties shaped the color palette, the emotional tone, the narrative of generosity. Musical publishers defined what holiday nostalgia sounds like. Illustrators built a character that became more universal than most national symbols. Retail families built the logic of gifting, expectation, and seasonal urgency. Each of them contributed a piece to a system far larger than themselves, a system that now operates without its architects. This is the quiet truth behind the holiday. Christmas became a global phenomenon, not through myth or miracle, but through bloodlines who learned to build an emotional infrastructure that could survive their absence. We don't inherit their traditions. We inherit their design, and the December we celebrate today is less a ritual and more an algorithm, one constructed by visionaries who understood how deeply a culture can be shaped by a single season. After a century of images, stories, rituals, emotions, and expectations, one question remains. Who owns December? Is it the families who built the first images? The corporations who engineered the emotions? The advertisers who shaped the narratives? The musicians, the illustrators, the storytellers whose creations became tradition? Or is December now owned by something far less visible? A structure that no longer remembers who created it. Because once a ritual becomes global, it stops belonging to its architects. It becomes a system that resets itself every year, a system that renews the same emotions in billions of people with astonishing precision, a system that persists whether anyone believes in it or not. December no longer needs the families who designed it. It no longer needs parades, commercials, or even myths to sustain itself. It runs on momentum, on repetition, on expectation, a self-maintaining loop powered by memory, nostalgia, and the quiet pressure to keep the ritual alive. So who owns December? The answer is simple and unsettling. No one and everyone. The architects are long gone. The system remains. And the holiday we celebrate today is not a tradition, but an inheritance from hands we never knew and interests we never saw. The final layer of December isn't who built it, it's why it persists. For everything we've uncovered, for every structure, every mechanism, every hidden decision behind this season, there is something worth admitting. December still has the power to bring people together. Families gather. Old friends reconnect. Strangers share moments they would ignore any other month. Even if the holiday was engineered, even if the rituals were shaped by forces we rarely see, the warmth people feel is still real. And maybe that's the one part of December no system can manufacture. Here's the truth behind the analysis. I can dissect the machinery of December, lay out the rituals, the emotional levers, the historical blueprints. But when the lights appear and the cold settles in, I still feel it. Not because it's magic, but because the human mind was designed to seek connection when the world grows dark. If December is an engineered season, it's also a reminder, a quiet call for people to gather and remember that none of us are meant to endure winter alone. Even the best-built systems can't replicate that. If this investigation changed the way you see December, there's more waiting for you here. Subscribe to Dark Side Protocol for the next investigation, every Wednesday. And if you'd like to see how myths and traditions look when satire tears away the surface, you'll find a link to Punchline Protocol in the description. Interpretation remains yours. The public archive ends here, but not the story. If you want the layers that don't fit into the clean version, the margins, the unintended consequences, the whispers around the creation of December, you already know where the deeper archive lives. Access is optional, understanding is not.